I think about some of our own stories, and so many people say to me, well, my story's not good enough. But your story is what's real, right? Do we try to pretend first that this is not my life or this is my life and I'm moving forward, and then it becomes reality? Or are we just looking for the idleness of staying in this pretend world because I don't believe my story's not good enough?
That's such a good question. You know, folks often feel like who they are and their life isn't important. But every single one of us has a story to share if we're willing to be vulnerable.
Okay, welcome to another edition of the Journey to Freedom podcast. I'm so excited about doing it every single opportunity that I get. This year, we are interviewing 100 successful Black men. And when I try to define success is not defined like, some of us would, I don't even know what it looks like in the dictionary. Maybe someday I should look it up in the dictionary, what success is. But what success means to me is people that are moving forward in our world and doing something for others. If you're doing it all for yourself and by yourself, I struggle with saying that you're successful. If you're not bringing somebody behind you, I struggle to saying you're successful. If you're not doing it in a way that serves others, and in my case, and to please my God, it's not success. And success doesn't mean the amount of money. Sometimes we look at, the greatest rappers or the greatest musicians or the greatest artists or the greatest athletes, and we say they're successful. And then some of them would tell you they're not as successful as that you believe they are, because in their minds they don't believe success. But when I see a dad who's taking care of his kids, that is spending time, edifying and growing that kid to be somebody that he could possibly, the best person he could possibly be, that's success. When I see somebody who goes into their community and gives awareness to the things that are happening and then creates relationship and brings people together, that's success. And today we have Jeff Campbell on the podcast today. And I haven't spent a lot of time with Jeff, but I can tell you from the time that I have and from what I know about him, that he is a server. He is serving others. He has a place called the Emancipation Theater. He's excited because he gets to do it every single day. He gets to go out and he gets to make a difference in people's lives every single day. And through something that is so important to us, through entertainment and through theater and through storytelling. And I tell you what, some of the greatest people or successful people in the world, you can tell by the way that they tell stories. You can tell by the way that you can listen. If you've ever been to something that just moved you, it's probably through a story. It's not through, I could get up here and I could give you 10 tips to the 5 pillars and you would fall asleep. I could sit down with Jeff and we could put it in a story and we could put it where it makes sense to people and it connects. So I think that's what story does more than anything. It connects us to each other. It connects us to something that we believe at one point, oh, I felt that same way too. And now we have some bond together. And so, Jeff, thank you for being on today. Thank you for being part of our broadcast. I can't wait for the time that we get to spend together. I'd love for you to start out with who you are. Where did you begin, or wherever it is that you want to tell people? I literally tell them you can start at the womb and go all the way to where you're at now, or you can start where you're at now. And most people choose to tell us a little bit more about themselves. So go ahead, Jeff. It's all yours.
Well, thanks a lot, Doc, for having me. I super appreciate the opportunity to share my story. As you know, I deeply understand and appreciate how powerful our stories can be. And so it's an honor and a privilege to have this opportunity with you. My name is Jeff Campbell, and I am the creative director of Emancipation Theater Company. We got our name from the Marcus Garvey quote, who said, "We must emancipate ourselves through mental slavery, for though others may free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind." And we believe that that storytelling frees the mind. Now, we are not a theater company in the traditional sense, nor do we have a physical space for dramatic works, stage or cinema. Instead, Emancipation Theater is a place we go to in the mind to find freedom in the challenges, choices, and consequences of our existence. In the plot of every story, there is the challenge, the choice, and the consequence. The challenge is what they call the rising action. When you are introduced to the protagonist character, and that character is met with a challenge or the main ideas of the plot. And the character is inside of what is called a setting. And the setting is the time, place, and the circumstance of the story. Mm-hmm. And that is where the plot begins. And along that challenge, the character meets several different choices that they have to make. And then the final choice is called the climax. And then they have what you call the denouement, or the falling action or resolution. And we at Emancipation Theater call that the consequence of our choices. So we like to say that we are not just storytellers, but we are story. Your life has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you are both the protagonist and antagonist of your own story. And we are just a series of challenges, choices, and consequences. Mm-hmm. And we make the choice to be either the hero or the villain. There's a fine line between what is a hero and what is a villain. A hero is someone who is met with a challenge and experiences trauma or experiences pain and chooses to fight to never let anyone ever go through what they went through again. Okay. Whereas a villain is someone who experiences pain, who experiences trauma within their challenge, and they want everybody to feel what they felt. So throughout our lives, we are always met with that choice. Do we want to be the hero or do we want to be the villain within our story? And so that is why Emancipation Theater exists, to meet these challenges and to make these choices and to face these consequences. And so that's who we are and what we do.
Yeah, right. So before I jump in, you just gave me all these things, these questions that I want to ask about. Before we do that, is there something, maybe just a little bit about you, your story, a little bit, not just the Emancipation Theater.
Okay.
But who's Jeff Campbell? Why is Jeff Campbell doing this? And, what made this such a unique or special place to be in your life?
Okay. Well, I was born in Lexington, Kentucky. And I'm 54 years old. And then my parents were from Decatur, Alabama. Okay. And my father was went to an HBCU, Alabama State University. And upon graduating, he got a job at IBM, the tech company that was tech companies before tech companies were tech companies. Mm-hmm. And he was transferred from the Lexington plant to a plant in Boulder, Colorado. And instead of growing up in Boulder, which was very expensive and affluent, we lived in a suburb of Boulder County called Longmont, Colorado. And I moved there when I was 4 years old. And there I experienced moving from a very rural South to a very rural Southwest. And I was what I would consider the fly in the buttermilk, which is, of course, the African-American colloquialism that we all know, that I was often just the only Black kid in my class. And so I met with a lot of um, ridicule and bullying. At the same time, I met some wonderful people who are still friends with today. But that was really my challenge, having an existential crisis at a very early age, wondering to myself, what would my life be like if I lived back with my cousins and I didn't stick out like a fly in the buttermilk. And I resented for a long time that choice that my father made. Um, and it really shaped the person that I was, where I found acceptance, or what felt like acceptance in me, was I became the class clown.
Mm,
So
mm.
this is where my sense of humor came from, and that transforming the energy of that attention, and it is where I became a performer. And I still wonder to this day, if I didn't stick out like a fly in the buttermilk, would I have wanted to be on stage curating the attention around me, um, or would I have chose some other life path? I guess we'll never know. But my father passed away in 2022, and I uh, came to a lot of realizations throughout that process. We were able to have closure and reconciliation before he passed. So it was really a triumph and not a tragedy, because he was a hell of a guy and he did it, man. He really did it. And so I have nothing but the utmost respect for him and those choices that he made, because he was a pioneer. And so I just have a lot of respect for that. And one thing he wanted me to do was to work as hard as I could to make my business successful. So that is kind of how I have come to this point.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That gives a great perspective of you and who you are. One of the things you shared earlier, and I'll just start with this. You talked about the hero and the villain, and immediately I went to, in my mind, the times in my life where I've been the villain, where somebody hurt me, somebody did something to me, and I wanted everybody to feel that. And then I think about all the times that now later in life, as I think I've matured a little bit, the amount of times I want to be the hero, the amount of times that I want to serve and share. Through story, how does one change their mindset into trying to be the hero more often than being the villain? Because I think we all fall into categories where that happens to us all the time. We want people to feel our pain, but we also want people to feel our triumphs, right? We athletics, and I think of like games, and people that get into, I'm on the, my team is the Nuggets, where and I want to triumph with them, right? Because I want them to be the hero, so I don't have to deal with that villain side of me. What kind of mindset does storytelling help, and what you guys do help me to be able to be the hero more often?
Well, thank you for asking that question. That's a great question. But let's start off with the character.
Okay.
The character has two choices: to be the exception to the story, or the example. Uh,
Okay.
and so when we are see the example reinforced, that is um, that is a villain. Sometimes we gravitate towards that example. And there are very few people who make an exception to become the hero in that case.
Hmm.
Conversely speaking, if you see the example as the hero more often than not, then you have a greater tendency of becoming a hero. Meaning, we have to have good mentorship, we have to have good guidance, we have to be able to look to folks whose characteristics we seek to emulate. Um, a lot of folks like, I'm not influenced by nobody. Nobody tells me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of good thinking. But there is nothing like having the respect of people that you admire. And respect and trust are those kinds of things that in order to receive it, you have to give a little bit of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an extremely vulnerable place when we're making that choice, when we're at that climax, in that moment, in that story of our life, in that episode where we choose to either be hero or villain. And then the other part of it is of course the consequence. So if we look at the consequence is either a triumph or it's a tragedy. And tragedies, like I mentioned about my father, he battled cancer for 22 years, and he had 4 transplants. He had 2 stem cell transplants, a liver transplant, and a kidney transplant.
Wow.
And and through the course of that 22 years, having his master's degree in business, already having his degree as a electrical engineer, the choice he made was to draw closer to God. So he went and got his degree in divinity and became a pastor in that time. And so he made that choice, and then God gave him 22 years. And yes, it was painful. There was plenty of blood transfusions, there were close calls, but his 3 children, his grandchildren, his wife were able to be there with him, to reconcile with him when he was conscious. He was able to make a conscious decision, say, do not intubate me. If I go unconscious again, let me go. Let me go with God. I'm okay. That's a powerful thing. And so the reality to me was he's okay. He's okay. And the question was I okay? The question was my mother okay? Were we okay? The people that were in his life that he leaves behind. And so being the hero or the villain comes down to those choices. And without having examples, it's really tough. Harriet Tubman is an exceptional human being that we can live by her example. Marcus Garvey, Sojourner Truth, um, Frederick Douglass. These are exceptional people. They are the true essence of American exceptionalism. They are exceptional people that can all be examples for us to live our lives in triumph, no matter the time, place, and circumstance or the setting.
That is so cool. What if you're watching this now? What I would like for you to do is push pause, go get yourself a piece of paper and a pen, because this is just going to continue to get better. If you are walking or exercising with your headphones on, I'm not going to tell you to stop exercising. I'm going to tell you to pull your phone out, open up the notes app, and be able to take some notes here, because the stuff that we're learning right now, I've already got a page and a half of just notes. One of the things you brought up was characteristics. Can maybe kind of tell us the difference, because we hear a lot about having great character and having value and being morally sound and looking up to somebody's character. But you talked to them, you changed that word, you added the characteristics to that. Kind of help me expand that a little bit.
Yeah, I did that for context, and definitely in theater, we choose to play a role um, in a performance.
Mm-hmm.
In life, we perform a role to play. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
so so words are very powerful, and depending on what context we have, one of the things I ask in my workshops are we living in a simulation? Did
Mm.
did
Wow.
did Shakespeare let us know that we were living in a simulation when he said all the world is a stage and the men and women are merely players? And that's how powerful role play becomes. That's how powerful theater becomes because we get our opportunity to look at a simulation of life and learn from it. So characteristics are just simply the attributes that make up the character. So you always start with the character, the who. When we did this introduction, it was who are you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, where are you from? That is the setting, you know? And then what are the challenges, choices, and consequence? The why. Why is this important to you? That's the challenge. And then so what is it that you're going to choose? That's the choice. What do you choose? To be the hero or the villain? And then how does does this um, how do the consequences play out? How does
Mm-hmm.
it end? Is it a triumph or a tragedy? You know, our bodies
Uh-huh.
don't live forever. Our bodies will not live forever, but what will live forever in the hearts of the people that we encounter is the story that they tell about us. So if you want to live within others and bring them joy and bring them a smile on their face when they remember you, if you a laughter when they think of you, what are the choices that you're making? If you you know want to bring pain and sadness, what are those choices that you're making? And so some folks live within us and they bring us pain and sadness, you know, universally. I think of Adolf Hitler or somebody like that because of the choices that he made. And then others, you know, bring us joy when we think about him. Martin Luther King Jr., you know, so where is it that what are the choices that you want to make? Do you want to put a smile on people's face when that final curtain closes? Because it's gonna close, brother. It's gonna close.
Wow. So many things are popping into my mind. One is the poem that the dash poem that says who we are is between the years. And I don't know if you know that poem very well, but it says I was born in this time and this is the time that on my tombstone it says the time. But what really mattered is the dash, the things that happened in between, that story that was created between the time you were born and the time you passed away. I'll get you that poem because it's an exceptional poem. But what I think about that is, my life's work now is helping people go from knowing to doing. This is what I know I'm supposed to do, to being able to actually doing it, understanding, how do I, that evolution between becoming the person that I want to be, so I can do the thing that I want to do. Not teaching the person how to do the thing, but teaching the person how to become the person in order to do it. I think it fits so in line when I think about your examples. Am I going to be an example or going to be an exception? That is so huge when you're becoming, because now as I'm making, like you said, the choice, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm making the choice each day whether my life needs to be an example or my life needs to be an exception. And to me, exception sounds more like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, more like the excuses that we have,
Mm,
the the things that we say. Well, I'm not exceptional. That would be the other word, right?
right.
The exception because I wasn't able to achieve that where I was able to bring somebody along with me. Am I kind of close to that as I'm thinking about my story? Is maybe that's it, or am I totally off?
No. This is great. Um, so when I say exception, um, let's take for example health and health care and
Okay.
health disparities, and when we consume a diet that impacts our body, and um, that becomes habitual, and it's something that's very popular among the masses. You can look to that example and emulate it, and you'll get the same results.
Okay.
Or you can choose to be the exception to that
Okay.
and choose something different and choose to be more mindful of what you consume, and it impacts your body different, and then that creates a habit of triumph rather than a
Okay.
habit of tragedy. And
So
so,
being the exception,
yes,
not the exception because I don't want to do it, but being the exception and going against the masses, going against the status quo,
right,
going against maybe the things that I've learned, the habits that I've created,
right,
because we've all created these incredibly good habits in some
right,
cases, and we've created some really bad habits. And
right,
on those bad habits, when I'm thinking about becoming the person that you need to be to do the thing, you have to be the exception on I'm watching TV every night, or
right,
I got to go to bed with the news because the news tells me that the world is worse than I am. So,
right, right.
all
That
right, gotcha.
that consuming
Consuming
that
the fear
fear.
and that kind of stuff. So when I think of, there's two things that I kind of look, but there's contributing factors and then there's deciding factors. The contributing factors are the things I can't control,
Right,
but in my story, sometimes I let those contributing factors take over who I am. I think sometimes instead of me deciding to be the exception or to be the example,
right,
how in the world of story, as I'm thinking through my story, because I think it's a great place to start or
yeah,
a great place to wake up every morning. What's my story going to look like today? How do I limit the effect that some of the contributing factors may have on me?
right, right. Great question. So, like for example, my father, he did not choose to have cancer.
Yeah. Okay.
He didn't choose that.
Hmm.
That was a challenge that had nothing to do with his with any choices that he had made. It was the time, place, and circumstance. We know all about environmental racism, and Decatur, Alabama is no exception. And they have many cases, just like my father's, where people in this community were getting the same multiple myeloma that my father was getting. And so that had nothing to do with any of that had nothing to do with what he experienced with him making any sort of conscious decision. However, what he chose to do, in spite of that, in spite of the pain, in spite of, he didn't choose to give up. He didn't choose to stop. He didn't choose negativity. He chose to do something in spite of that challenge coming up him that he quite frankly didn't deserve, and that nobody in that community and that neighborhood that is living next to that landfill and that toxic and those toxic chemicals, nobody. That was just the time, place, and the circumstances that they were in. That was just the setting. So it is what you choose in that point, and it's just not an easy choice, and it is the exception, because the example is to say this happened to me and this is horrible, and I'm going to give up, and woe is me, and all of these things. That is the example of what we do. Something happens to us, and you know we become a victim. And it's not that we haven't been victimized. It's not as if these things aren't true, that these things have happened to us, but it's really about what we choose uh,
Gotcha.
in spite of our setting. So, and that is not the easiest thing to do. Harriet Tubman, in spite of her setting, she got a call, and she heard a story about a network of people called the Underground Railroad that could get her from Maryland to Philadelphia, 90 miles in 5 days on foot. She traveled. And once she got there, she recognized that she was free, but she was a stranger in a strange land.
Mhm.
And she wasn't free until others were free.
So,
So then she made another choice to go back and forth from Maryland to Philadelphia through the thicket into the city of brotherly love 13 times. That's that is a choice to become the hero and not the villain. That she wanted what happened to her, the trauma that happened to her. She was struck in the head as a child by a piece of iron, and she would have seizures because of that. But what did she choose? She chose to work as hard as she could to set others free. She became a spy for the Union. She became a scout for the Union. She became the first woman to lead a regiment into battle for the United States of America. So she's quite the exception when it comes to human beings. When we look at our circumstances in the 21st century, we're not facing the kind of challenges, we're not in the kind of setting that Harriet was in. But what are the choices that we are making? Are we choosing to be the example, to be the victim, or are we choosing to be the exception? And in spite of our time, place, and circumstance, what is the choice that we make?
So good, so good. Yeah, as I'm thinking through this, and I just finished a book called "There Is No Tiger," saying that there is, the tigers that were of the past are not of the future. It's about overthinking and getting caught up in this thing called overthinking. But when I think of, we idolize actors and people who pretend that they're somebody else, right? I think of a Denzel Washington and how great a craft he is, a great actor that he is, to be able to take a story and make it come to life. And then I think about some of our own stories, and so many people say to me, well, my story's not good enough. But your story is what's real, right? It's not what Denzel's doing. And so do we need in this world of story, in the choices that we're making and the consequences that we have, do we try to pretend first that this is not my life, or this is my life and I'm moving forward, and then it becomes reality? Or are we just looking for the idleness of staying in this pretend world because I don't believe my story's not good enough?
Yeah, that's such a good question. You know, folks often feel like who they are and their life isn't important. But every single one of us has a story to share if we're willing to be vulnerable. Every one of us has a story to share that can be beneficial to someone else. Someone else could benefit from the path that you chose. Someone else could benefit from understanding the circumstance, the time, place, and circumstance that you find yourself set in. In one of our workshops, we have an exercise called "The Stage is the Self, and the Content is the Character." And in that is, you have five places on a stage. You have downstage, so what is it that you downplay or minimize in your life or deny in your life? Okay. And then you have stage left. Where in your life do you feel left out? Left out of the conversation, left out of participation. Then we have what we call upstage. That's when you're in the back of the stage and you have to project louder than everything else. So what is it that you want so bad for folks to hear, but you just don't feel heard? And then you have stage right. And stage right is, what are the principles that you stand on? What are the things that you believe that no matter what, whether you participated in it or not, what are the things that you feel are right in this world, or that should be set right or should be stated as right? And then finally, the fifth place is center stage. When you're the star of the show, what is your statement of intention? And where do you need your supporting role? Where do you need others to play supporting roles? And so that is an exercise we do in a workshop called Third Eye Theater, Rewriting the Subconscious for Self Mastery. And so And so that is one of the exercises we do in that. Um, and it's really just to be as vulnerable as you possibly can, because in vulnerability is how we allow empathy to come. So you
Mm-hmm.
have these three pillars that we're after, these three pieces that we're after. We're after vulnerability or sharing your story,
Mm-hmm.
empathy, the power of listening. We always talk about the power of storytelling, but the
Mm-hmm.
power of listening is where empathy comes into play. And then finally, solidarity. And once you go through the process of being vulnerable, um, experiencing empathy from others, then you have solidarity and you build what is called relationships of consequence. With America, Black folks are inconsequential to the people whose upward mobility we are dependent upon. Our, our upward mobility is predicated on our proximity to whiteness, quite frankly. They are our doctors, they are our lawyers, they are the police officer arresting us, they are our employers by and large, more so than not. And if they are a person of color, that person of color is operating under an infrastructure that was created to uphold the structures, institutions, and systems rooted in white supremacy. And so until we understand that um, we have risen to the highest ranks in military, we have risen to the highest offices in business and commerce, we have risen to the highest laboratories of medicine and technology, we have within our community the greatness of this country. And once we begin to look internally and build those relationships of consequence within ourselves, where we are consequential to one another's upward mobility, then Black men and women will begin to heal, and these five pillars will begin to become solid and solvent, and we will begin to develop strong habits rather than a lot of the weak habits that we have.
Wow, man, how do I unpack all that you just said? That is so good. Oh my gosh. So one of the things that came when you talk about being vulnerable, and that's a place that we got to go when we get into your workshops and your theaters. When I hear that word throughout my life, that's pretty much meant weakness. If you're vulnerable, you're weak. But it's not really. It's your authentic. You're you. It's the beginning of you being able to express your story. How do you help people see words that are like that are part of our habits, part of our thought process, part of our belief system? I guess is what I'm saying. How do we take that and move that to where it's a strength instead of a weakness?
Well, it goes, good question, man. It really goes back to that trust and respect. So we
Mm-hmm.
have a workshop called Role Play is the Ritual, and it is it's team building, it's trust building. When you think about teams, um, leadership and teamwork, we often always say that it's the same thing. Leadership and teamwork is the same thing. Without a leader, there isn't a team. Without teams, there is no, without teams, there is no leader. Without leaders, there are no teams. And so um, sharing one another's story and building empathy, um, what we find is our individual motivations. Within our individual motivations, we're seeking to find common purpose for the whole. Individual motivations for each participant, common purpose for the whole. And we can't get there until we trust one another. And so trust and respect, you have to set some rules of engagement, and trust the process. Another theater term we use is the suspension of disbelief. In theater, the suspension of disbelief is, you know that I'm not driving a car right now. You understand that I'm not driving a car right now, but you're suspending that disbelief so that you can enjoy the story.
Yeah.
The same goes for the context in which we create words within each exercise,
Mhm.
and the fact that it is an exercise. Play the exercise powerfully so that you can utilize the lessons of the story of the exercise powerfully outside of the workshop, outside into your life. You can't be powerful out there if you don't choose to be powerful in here. And part of that is about being vulnerable. So the first things we do is we begin to play a game called That Reminds Me Of. And I will give you a series of prompts. Excuse me. I give a series of prompts, and everybody begins the story with That Reminds Me Of. And as you hear the story of others, you piggyback off of what they said to share your story. So one of the, what is a story that your family likes to tell about you? What is a talent that you have, and when did you discover it? When is the first time you recognized that race was an issue to others in your life? And as you go through these series of prompts, every time, tears, tears, or laughter, people find that in a room full of strangers or a room full of coworkers, where they didn't think they had much in common, they discover how much of that they really share with one another. And so it is really about building that trust that allows people later on in the workshops, once we get to the stages of self and the content is the character, once we get there, they have now built this level of trust and respect for one another by revealing that, wow, we're a whole lot more common than we thought we were when we began. So
That sounds like such a powerful tool to be able to use to get people to understand how common we do have, and some of the commonalities that we do have. Are there some role plays in the system that you have with the theater that are better than, that are really better than others, that are, I mean, obviously there's some that people like the most, and the ones that are better, what kind of things do they deal with? The things that really get into the heart of people or getting to the transformational phase. So I imagine those are the ones that people come out of with and say, "This changed my life."
yeah,
For others, and it might be a buildup. I don't know. It might be a buildup. We got to start here before we can get to here.
yeah.
But is it, what types of things are in the role plays that you're able to do that get people out of their head and into their heart, and then ultimately transformative into their soul, I guess it would be, because
Yeah.
I see that happening.
Um, well, the first one that we start with is the hardest one, and people aren't as excited about the first one. Now, keep in mind, I often do one-offs, so I'll do one of the 5 workshops with folks if that's all that they want to do. But to do it in a boot camp style is to go through all 5 of the workshops together, and they're in sequence. And we start off with the Underground Railroad culture course, and I share the story of Harriet Tubman, and juxtapose it with the story of George Washington, and talk about these 2 folks in terms of, who do we celebrate and elevate and amplify in the master narrative. Um, uh, Underground Railroad Culture Course is disrupting the master narrative uh, of anti-Blackness and all forms of bias. So we start there, and it just provides context for how everything else plays out. And so that one's probably the hardest one, and people are probably the most uncomfortable. But in that, I use a module. I use a module called the Interdevelopmental uh, Cultural Inventory, which was a continuum created by this guy named Michael J. Bennett, a PhD of the Intercultural Development Institute in San Francisco. And it has 5 points along the continuum, moving from monoculturalism to multiculturalism. The first one is denial, then there is polarization, then there is minimization, then it is acceptance, and the final one is adaptation. Adaptation symbolizing multiculturalism, and denial symbolizing monoculturalism. And so with along that continuum, now I took it out of the context because it's for anti-bias. And it was just too vanilla for me to really talk to Black people in that context. So I put it under the context of anti-Blackness. So denial would be the capitalist. Polarization would be the dogmatist. The opportunist is the minimization. The ally is acceptance. And the abolitionist is adaptation. And so the capitalist or denial is the one that there's no problem. This is the system. This is how it works. It's very Donald Trump, the capitalist, who will espouse a bunch of rhetoric that we're not even sure if he believes it or not. Can't really tell if he actually believes it or not, but he knows he can wield it for who? His watchdogs, the predators, or the dogmatists. The dogmatists, they have been programmed, indoctrinated, programmed, and to believe all the rhetoric of the capitalists. And they say, well, yeah, there might be a problem in this society, but it's your fault, Black people, because you did this. You're enslaved and you're inferior culture and you're bad. So that's the polarization. And it happens in reverse. Black people will internalize that and say, yeah, if we're more like white people, we will be accepted and we'll be okay. Then you have the minimalist or the opportunist who says, well, this is the sort of thing that happens. Yeah, there's a problem, but I'm going to be the next Jay-Z or the next Oprah, or I could solve the problem myself. And so they minimize it and say, oh, it's really about class, not race, not understanding that there is a Black and white class war going on. And guess what that's called, folks? Racism. And then you have the ally, who are those folks who, oh, it's so horrible what has happened. And yes, but I feel powerless. There's nothing I can do about it. Until you finally get to adaptation, of the people who say, this is wrong, the system is wrong, it's been wrong from the root, from the structure of this whole thing, and I'm going to work to do something to change it. And none of these characters are perfect. What rules these characters, often in white and often in Black, often in white, is a superiority complex. And what rules in us is an inferiority complex. Now, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. Yeah. So it's not always just so black and white. But that is what often happens. And this is the most difficult workshop to teach. But once we get there and once we get through it, there's a series of exercises throughout that workshop. Once we get there, it's all downhill from there. Okay. We set a context. Then after that, we get to the team building. After the team building, we start working on storytelling fundamentals. After fundamentals, we move on to third eye theater and start rewriting the subconscious. And then finally, we get from allies to abolitionists, your self manifesto. So that is the boot camp, or all 5 workshops together. And when you go through that series, it's really powerful.
Oh, I can imagine. And is this like over a week, or does it take, like, is each boot camp a day, or is it a week, or how does that? How do you usually get that done for somebody who's wanting to get in?
We could do it retreat style and do
Okay,
all 5 over a weekend, or we can do it like one session a week, depending on what the client wants.
gotcha. Okay,
So yeah.
gotcha. Wh- I'm thinking, there's all, like I said, there's things going through my mind, and I think about relationships and how important our relationships are. I can imagine if somebody goes through this as a group, that the bond that they have goes beyond the workshop, because they've now told story to each other several different ways, several different times, several and went through this together. Is that kind of what you're finding when your groups have done this and they've done it together and wanting to come back for more? What usually happens at the end of these where these groups have done this?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the objective is definitely developing the relationship. We believe ultimately that the power is in the relationship. Uh, there are folks who live in a world of where none of this stuff really makes sense to them. All of this DEI stuff,
Mhm.
where that's really a corporate America thing, but it never impacts the proletariat. It never impacts the laborers, and within that labor force, you'll see black and white getting along together, but not really understanding the stuff in this sociological context. They understand things, from their day to day. They don't really speak on those things, and if they do, they shun away from it. They just know that they have a task to accomplish, and they get it done. So we've got to be able to recognize that and meet people where they're at. But yes, the objective is to hopefully have a place where folks become more mindful of those mindsets,
Yeah, yeah.
and their language begins to change. And once the language begins to change, you become more thoughtful. So absolutely, the objective of it all is not, that you get this word right or you identify who the opportunists are, and the objective is that the folks that go through this together come out with a relationship that they of consequence. That is the final objective, to get across the bridge of consequence, where we are no longer inconsequential to one another, but we are consequential to one another. Black, white, whoever you are, that we are consequential to one another's freedom. That your liberation is tied to my liberation.
So would you say that and I can see this happening, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's where people you begin to tell your story, so people are now listening to your story. But I can imagine by going through a process like this, we are so egocentric that as somebody's telling their story, we're thinking about our own story, we're thinking about our own thing. But I think it sounds like it develops a muscle that allows us to be able to hear what people are saying, because story is so much easier because we can relate to it. And
Yes.
then now we have better relationships, and we're able to cultivate relationships because now we understand story. We understand that that's until I know your story, until I know you, it's hard for me to care about you. But
Right.
once I do know you and I do know your story, now I care about you on even a deeper level, that I want to even help you become more.
Right.
Is that kind of what comes out of that?
Absolutely. In the third workshop, Storytelling Amplifies Us, we go over the framework of the fundamentals of storytelling, but then we shift to listening. And with listening, we listen with the head, the heart, and the gut. The head we symbolize as the conscious mind, or the search engine, which is the hardest thing to control, is where the most energy is always spent, that we're always consuming from the head, listening to story. And so to be able to keep this train of thought, to stay on track, is the hardest thing to control. The heart is the subconscious mind. We call that the hard drive or the heart drive. And where that what lives there are the memories, the emotions, and the relationships. And right there, when we say that we know something, that we have something memorized, we don't say that we know it by head we say that we know it by heart. When you speak from the heart, you speak with sincerity. When you don't have the heart to tell someone, is that you have empathy for them to shield them from that pain. So the heart is where the memories, where the emotions, and the relationships live. And then you have what we call the unconscious mind, the gut mind. This is where 95% of your serotonin is in your gut. Mm-hmm. And what happens there is your unconscious mind is working, or where the habits are. This is the algorithm. Once you develop things that you're downloading into your hard drive and you're constantly searching your search engine, your algorithm has a habit of showing you that, or reacting to it without you having to think, without you having to seek it. If you look up, if you're shopping for shoes online, you're going to find out on every time you log on, your algorithm is going to start showing you these mm-hmm. shoes are on sale. Yeah. These shoes are on sale. That's that impulse, that intuition, that instinct that is popping up. That's why they call them cookies, because when you walk into a bakery and you smell cookies, right, you start getting that, mm-hmm. that craving. This is where your cravings live. This is where the goosebumps come from. This is where the lump in the throat comes from. This is the fight or flight, the butterflies when you lock eyes with that attractive person across the room. That's where this comes from, that instinctive, impulsive, intuitive mind. And so learning to listen from there, we do temple taps when it's something that we think about, that we wonder about, that we're already interested in. We hit the heart when it is something that we feel emotionally, makes us feel some type of way, or we can relate to it, or it reminds us of something. And then when it gives us a gut reaction, we do the tummy taps. We tap the tummy. So during the exercise, I ask people to, as they're listening to other stories, to either give a temple tap, hit the heart, or tummy tap. And so then that way they start to get in the habit of understanding how they are listening, which also gives you prompts for your question, makes you understand how you listen. You begin to ask questions better because, hey, that's something I always wonder about too. What is something that you learn from that? Mm-hmm. Or, hey, how does that make you feel? Mm-hmm. Because when you said that, man, that really makes me sad. How does that make you feel? Or, wow, that really made the hair on my back of my neck stand up when you said that. Do you get that feeling too? And so we're training ourselves to remember how it is that we listen when we go through that exercise.
Wow, so good, so good. As I think, I'm going to take a group of men to, I'm going to take them to Alabama, and we're going to go through, we're going to go to Birmingham, we're going to go to Selma, we're going to go to Montgomery in February next year. I would love to have one of the days be your story stuff. So we need to get together and talk about how we're going to do that, because to experience it here, I think is one thing. And the reason I'm taking folks is because I want them to say, okay, this is our history. When I think about your Harriet Tubman Day, this is the environment that she was dealing with. Oh my gosh. And then to be able to tell story, and then to walk away from that and to put some transformational groups together that then have the ability to go and be with each other throughout the next year with, follow-ups and that kind of stuff. And so I just want to, I want to give you a few more minutes, because I'm sure there's some things that I didn't discuss that, I can't believe we've been talking for an hour, because I could literally go probably another hour. Everybody else will be shutting us off. But we and I could spend some time together on this, because it is so impactful. If we can get into story, if we can get into understanding, like I said before, who somebody is, and really understand who they are, not just this is what I do, right? Because usually when we ask, who are you? Like, well, I'm a plumber, no, I'm not asking what you do. Who are you?
Right.
to be able to do that. So go ahead and take the next few minutes, however long you want to take, and just kind of, if there's anything that I missed in this time, we are going to be back together. We're going to do some more stuff together. Maybe we can even put together some, quick, things that we can do online with folks that could begin to practice it before they. Because I want people to go to your workshop. I want people to get into the boot camp. I want them to get deep. But until that happens, maybe there's some quick things that we might be able to put people together with that they could do and begin to practice and begin to start becoming the person that they need to be in order to accomplish the things that they want to do. So go ahead. Anything else that we missed here?
The only thing that I would say, the one thing that I'd say is like, that works really well for me as a meditation and it's because I'm a script writer, is journaling. I literally journal every morning, and I go back and read through my journal every night before bed.
Wow.
And that keeps me on my train of thought. Think about Underground Railroad. This keeps me on my train of thought, that I stay on track towards accomplishing my goals. And I share with myself in that journaling, things that I probably wouldn't share with anyone else. I guess they back in the day used to call it a diary. I just call it my journal. And I think when you take it from the mind and put it into matter, and using your arm,
yes,
and do it on handwriting, is better than typing, because handwriting, you retain it more, and you memorize it more, and you put more thought on it. And I constantly will scratch through a line, scratch it out and start over with a thought. But that's all a part of the process too. But writing, taking it out of your mind and putting it onto paper, into a physical space, so you can refer back to it and refine it if you need to, is really something powerful if you want to elevate your game, if you want to go further. So yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you. Hey, for those of you who are watching, thank you for another, being part of another episode. This is one of those that you listen to, I'm sure, as I did, the whole way through without distractions. I hope you go back and you take some notes. I want to make sure that, Jeff will put your contact information and the ability to get to your workshops on there, because I think it's so important. I have a 7-minute daily message. In fact, it's called the 7-minute message .us. If you go to that, where it's every day we work on, Thanksgiving, we work on affirmations, we work on, some of these things that will begin. I'm going to, add story to it. If you're wanting to be part of it, I want to take, a group through, a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to be able to do. And so I hope and pray that you're not taking these lightly, that you're watching them and you're realizing that I want to become this other person. I want to become this dream. And story is one of the best ways to do it. Relationships are everything. I see Jeff nodding, and it's everything. And so you need to put you in the rooms. I talk about rooms so often, is where you need to be in rooms where people can lift you up, can move you forward, and they can edify you. But you need to know how to do it while you're there. So again, thank you for another, Jeff, it has been amazing. We will get together again. I promise you, Jeff and I will do something together. I'm putting that out there right now. That it's impossible to have a time like this that we just have and not do something together that will help you improve your life. And so again, thank you. I'm so glad that we did it. I look forward to talking to each and every single one of you, as we move forward. And you guys have an awesome, amazing, just incredible day.
Thank you.